Not Neanderthals, not a prehistoric genocide, not a flood or an ancient virus. The most important event in human history may have happened and no one remembers. Around 300,000 years ago, somewhere on an ancient and now lost land, two human lineages, separated for more than 1.5 million years, met again, not to fight, but to mate. And from that forgotten reunion, modern humans were born. Not in the way textbooks taught you, not as a linear evolution from a single ape-like ancestor, but as the outcome of a deep genetic reunion between two ancient human species that had evolved like two parallel worlds. A team of scientists recently uncovered this hidden chapter using a new tool called COBRA, short for coalescent-based reconstruction of ancestral admixture. It's the first genetic model capable of piercing through time, using your DNA to trace a union that has long vanished from memory. And what they found will change how we see ourselves. Every modern human alive today, from Americans to Africans, Australians to Filipinos, carries the DNA of two distinct ancestral human lineages. One lineage accounts for 80% of our ancestry, the other just 20%, and neither one was Neanderthal. Neither was Denisovan. So who were they? Why didn't they interbreed for over 1.5 million years? And why exactly around 300,000 years ago did those two worlds collide? The answer might force you to rethink what it means to be human and raise an even bigger question. How many other human lineages who once existed, once loved, once fought, have been erased from history simply because we were the ones who survived? Part 2. The author of history, the COBRA model. Some scientific tools change archaeology. Some change history itself. But COBRA, it changes how we understand ourselves. COBRA isn't a secret government code name. It stands for Coalescent-Based Reconstruction of Ancestral Admixture. Unlike older models like PSMC, which assume that all human ancestors belong to a single, randomly mixed population, COBRA goes further and braver. It proposes something never confirmed before. Our ancestors were not one, they were two. Two ancient human lineages, separated for over 1 million years, as if they had evolved on different planets. Both left their marks in the DNA of modern humans. And COBRA, by reading the subtle fluctuations in coalescence time, the moment when two gene copies share a common ancestor, reveal the hidden hybrid origin of our species. When researchers applied COBRA to genetic data from 26 human populations across Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas, the impossible became clear. Every single one of us carries the trace of an ancient admixture event, roughly 300,000 years ago, between two ancestral human lineages, now called Lineage A and Lineage B. Lineage A, the dominant one, contributing about 80% of our genetic heritage. Lineage B, the minority, just 20%, and over time, it seems to have been gradually erased from the human genome. But the real mystery isn't just in the numbers, it's in the question, why did one lineage come to dominate? And why did the other, despite surviving millions of years, vanish almost completely? Was there once a silent war? No weapons, no blood, just generation after generation of natural selection, until only one lineage's legacy remained, a genetic war, fought not with violence, but with inheritance. Part 3. The two mysterious lineages, A and B. This story doesn't begin with Homo sapiens. It begins with an ancestor much older, one that lived around 1.5 million years ago. At some unknown moment in deep time, the ancestral human population split into two separate branches. No one knows exactly why. It could have been climate change, geography, competition for resources, or maybe just the randomness of evolutionary fate. We now call them Lineage A, perhaps the more adventurous group. They began to migrate, but got caught in a severe genetic bottleneck, where their numbers plummeted to the brink of extinction. Yet from this pressure came something powerful, a concentrated, distinct genetic identity. Lineage B possibly stayed behind in Africa, or another isolated region. Larger, more stable, and rich in ancestral diversity, they preserved traits that lineage A had long lost. For over 1.2 million years, these two lineages did not interbreed, nor did they go to war. They simply existed apart, like two evolutionary timelines running in parallel. Until one day, around 300,000 years ago, they met again. No one knows what caused this prehistoric reunion. Perhaps shifting climates, perhaps expanding territory. But the astonishing part is this: they didn't kill each other. They mated. Lineage A and B were so genetically different that by today's standards, they might have been classified as two entirely separate species. The difference between them may have been as large as that between humans and chimpanzees today. And yet, from that union came every modern human alive today. No matter your continent, your language, your skin color, you are descended from that ancient, improbable reunion. It wasn't a regional event. It wasn't an isolated case. It was a global turning point, etched into the DNA of every person on Earth. We didn't come from one bloodline. We are the product of a union. Part 4, the traces in our DNA. DNA doesn't lie, and when you let it speak, sometimes terrifying secrets emerge. Cobra didn't just reveal that all modern humans are the result of an ancient hybridization event. It went further, mapping exactly which parts of our genomes come from lineage A and which come from lineage B. The results were shocking. The segments of DNA inherited from lineage B, the minority lineage contributing only about 20% of our ancestry, were mostly found far from protein-coding regions. In other words, on the outskirts of the genome, in places that don't affect vital functions, in places that nature can ignore or eliminate. This suggests that the DNA from lineage B was gradually purged by natural selection, not because it was bad, but because it simply didn't fit well with the biological machinery of lineage A. In contrast, DNA from lineage A, which makes up about 80% of our ancestry, closely matches the genomes of Neanderthals and Denisovans. And if that's true, an incredible possibility arises. Lineage A wasn't just our ancestor, it was also the ancestor of Neanderthals and Denisovans. In other words, lineage A is the genetic root of every human group, modern or archaic, across Eurasia. And lineage B? It's like a genetic ghost, once present, once mated, once left its mark, then slowly pushed to the margins of our genome. Forgotten, faded, erased. So maybe we didn't descend from a single pure line called Homo sapiens. Maybe we are the outcome of a forgotten reunion between two ancient human lineages that had no names, once existed, once loved, and then one of them simply disappeared into the cold shadows of natural selection. Part 5, Natural Selection, when lineage B was erased. You don't need guns to wipe out a people. You just need to make sure their children can't survive. That's how natural selection treated lineage B. When Cobra looked deep into the modern human genome, it didn't just show that B's genes were pushed away from protein-coding regions. It revealed something harsher. They were almost entirely excluded from the most crucial parts of the human body, specifically, regions controlling the immune system. No traces of G. Genes related to sensation, smell, hearing, touch. B is absent. Genes involved in antibacterial defense. Again, nothing from B. What remains are fragmented shards scattered in the genomic periphery, like echoes of something that once existed, but is no longer welcome. Why? Perhaps B's genes were simply incompatible with the biological machinery of lineage A. When they combined in a hybrid, the result might have been genetic instability, reduced immunity, weakened survival, or worse, infertility. And in the ruthless world of evolution, To not reproduce is to go extinct. So lineage B didn't vanish in a war. There was no fire, no blade, no battlefield. It disappeared in the cold silence of genetics. Nature didn't need to kill anyone. It simply made sure they had no descendants. And we, the descendants of that ancient hybridization, have been subconsciously selecting ourselves for thousands of generations. No orders were given, no judgments passed. Only one rule endured. Genes that fit survive. Genes that don't, like B, drift to the edges, then disappear. It wasn't genocide, it was evolution, cold, indifferent, and absolute. Part 6. The remaining genes from lineage B, the brain and nervous system. Natural selection erased most of the genes from lineage B, but not all of them. Amid the silenced stretches of DNA pushed to the margins, Cobre discovered something strange. Some gene clusters survived, and they didn't survive by accident. They survived with purpose. Not in the bones, not in the skin, not in the immune system. They survived in the brain. Specifically, the surviving genes from lineage B are strongly linked to neural connectivity, the foundation of memory and learning; startle response, one of the oldest survival instincts; neurotransmitter processing, how neurons communicate; and most intriguingly, genes that regulate blood flow to the brain, circadian rhythms, and even conscious awareness. These aren't minor genes. They're in the command center of the human body. So we must ask, could it be that lineage B, despite being marginalized, had a completely different nervous system? Could it be that this ancient union injected something new into the Homo sapiens' brain, a kind of neural fuel that had never existed before? And could that spark have triggered the cognitive leap we now call human? The leap that gave us language, imagination, creativity, the ability to tell stories, and eventually, the ability to wonder who we are. We still carry 80% of our genes from lineage A, but perhaps that first flicker of thought, that moment when we became more than survival machines, came from the forgotten 20%, not from strength, not from muscle, but from a mysterious neural mutation, born from the defeated lineage, the one that helped us become the storytelling species that now rules the earth. Part 7. A mirror in other species. Humans are not unique. If you think humans are special because we come from hybrid ancestors, think again. When scientists applied Cobre to other species, from dolphins to chimpanzees, from gorillas to bats, a new picture began to emerge. Humans are not alone in the journey of ancestral fusion. For example, the eastern lowland gorilla, Gorilla Barangay Growry, shows clear signs of a split rejoin event in its ancestry. Two lineages diverged around 150,000 years ago and then merged again about 15,000 years ago. The short-beaked common dolphin, Delphinus delphis, reveals evidence of a deep ancestral admixture event that occurred between 650,000 and 100,000 years ago, strikingly close to the time humans experienced theirs. Two species, one of the oceans, one of the mountains, living in entirely different worlds, yet bound by the same evolutionary pattern. Split, isolate, reunite. But not all species follow this path. The party-colored bat, Vespertilio marinus, despite having a rich genetic history, shows no trace of ancestral fusion. Its genome follows a straight evolutionary line. No branching, no rejoining, no hidden past, split in two. And that leads us to a larger truth. Evolution isn't a single road. It's a network. Some lineages split and vanish. Some come together and evolve into something stronger. Some survive through genetic exchange. Others persist for millions of years without ever needing to meet another. Humans are not the exception. We are just one thread in a vast biological labyrinth where genes aren't merely passed down, but also traded, merged, and sometimes contested. And it is precisely this dance of divergence and reunion that creates the breathtaking diversity of life. not because one species is better, but because some species know how to merge at the right moment. Part 8. The True History of Us, a reunion that created humanity. We often speak of the idea of a common ancestor of all humans, a poetic image, a first human, a single point of origin. But perhaps that was never true. According to what Cobra has revealed, we did not come from one ancestor, but from two ancient human lineages that lived apart for over 1.5 million years, evolving down completely separate paths, no contact, no interbreeding, no exchange of anything until one fateful moment around 300,000 years ago. That's when they met again, and this time they mated. And from that reunion, modern humans were born, not in one location, not in one tribe, but on a global scale, carved into the DNA of every one of us. This isn't a side note in history. This is the foundation, the forgotten first chapter of Homo sapiens. We were born from two worlds, one that endured a brutal bottleneck and emerged sharpened, concentrated, resilient, one that was diverse, rich in variation, but gradually faded away. They merged and created a species both tougher and more intelligent than either alone. And maybe the final message Cobra leaves us isn't written in DNA, but in something far simpler. If our ancestors could be separated for over 1 million years, so different they seemed incompatible, and yet still reunite to create a new species, then perhaps we too can learn from that legacy. In a world now fractured again by borders, race, beliefs, ideologies, maybe our genes are trying to remind us the strongest life is the one that knows how to come back together. Today, humanity stands divided once more, as if we're repeating the ancient split between lineage A and B. But perhaps what our history, what our very DNA is whispering, is that there is no force more powerful than reunion. We exist not because someone was superior, but because two very different ancestors once learned how to become one. So if one day you feel like the world is too divided to understand each other, remember, we were born from difference. If this video gave you a new way to see yourself and our species, don't forget to subscribe for more stories no textbook ever told about our ancestors. Tap the bell icon to never miss the next ancient mystery we uncover. Share this video because someone out there may be searching for the same answers. We don't just share the same blood, we share a forgotten reunion. See you in the next episode.